The fitness world has debated training frequency for decades. Train 6 days a week for maximum gains, some say. Train 3 days and recover properly, say others. Research has now provided a clear answer, and it is more nuanced than either camp suggests. The science shows that frequency itself is not the primary driver of muscle growth or strength. What matters is total weekly volume, the number of hard sets per muscle group per week. A 2016 study in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research by Brad Schoenfeld and colleagues directly compared high-frequency training, 3 days per muscle per week, to lower-frequency training, 1 day per muscle per week, while holding total weekly volume constant. The result? Muscle growth was statistically equivalent between groups. The key phrase is volume equated. When research controls for total volume, training frequency has a much smaller impact on hypertrophy than most people believe. The research for this video comes from Strength and Conditioning Science and Sports Medicine. Schoenfeld and colleagues' 2016 frequency study directly tested the frequency variable with volume controlled. A 2017 meta-analysis in Sports Medicine by Rolston and colleagues analyzed the relationship between weekly set volume and strength gain. Krieger's 2010 meta-analysis compared single versus multiple sets for hypertrophy. And Cahoon and colleagues tested volume versus frequency as predictors of hypertrophy in a direct 2018 trial. The foundational myth in training frequency debates is that more training days per week automatically means more muscle growth. This belief drives many people to train 6 or 7 days per week with insufficient volume per session, spreading their training thin. Research has consistently shown that this approach underperforms well-organized lower-frequency programs with higher per session volume. The problem is not frequency. It is the total stimulus delivered per muscle group per week. The practical problem with very high training frequency is recovery. Resistance training produces muscle protein damage that requires 48 to 72 hours to fully repair. Training the same muscle group before recovery completes not only limits performance in that session but potentially accumulates damage faster than the body can repair, a state research calls overreaching or overtraining syndrome. Studies show that overtraining reduces testosterone, raises cortisol, impairs sleep, and produces genuine strength and muscle loss. Research comparing well-designed high-frequency versus moderate-frequency programs, with volume equated, shows equivalent muscle growth outcomes. But practically, high frequency often means lower volume per session, spreading thin sets across many days. This tends to produce less metabolic stress and mechanical tension per session, which are the two primary hypertrophic stimuli. Moderate frequency training with higher per session volume concentrates these stimuli and has shown equal or superior results in research, with the additional advantage of greater flexibility and Rolston's 2017 meta-analysis in Sports Medicine is the most comprehensive analysis of volume-strength relationships published. The analysis found a clear dose-response relationship. Higher weekly set volumes produced greater strength gains, up to a plateau. The optimal range appeared to be 10 to 20 working sets per muscle group per week for most trained individuals. Below 10 sets, strength gains were suboptimal. Above 20 sets, no additional benefit appeared and recovery costs increased. Research on muscle protein synthesis, the cellular process underlying muscle growth, shows that it is elevated for 24 to 48 hours after a training session and returns to baseline by 72 hours. This recovery window explains why training frequency matters. If you wait 7 days between training a muscle, you miss 5 days of potential adaptation signal. 2 sessions per week per muscle group ensures you are stimulating muscle protein synthesis twice in that window. Research on specific population training frequency needs shows meaningful differences between beginners and advanced trainees. Beginners respond strongly to even a single weekly session per muscle group. Their sensitivity to the training stimulus is very high. Intermediate trainees typically optimize at 2 to 3 sessions per muscle per week. Advanced trainees sometimes benefit from higher frequencies, 3 or more times per muscle, but only if total volume is also very high. Cardio and conditioning frequency research follows different principles than resistance training. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity cardio per week as the evidence minimum for cardiovascular health. For body composition, research shows that adding cardio to resistance training improves fat loss without compromising muscle gain if performed thoughtfully. The research on cardio frequency suggests daily moderate intensity walking has no recovery cost, while high-intensity cardio requires 48-hour recovery, similar to. The research-based training framework prioritizes weekly volume targets first, then distributes that volume across the optimal frequency. For most people aiming at muscle growth, The target is 10 to 20 hard sets per muscle group per week. For a beginner or time-limited individual, this could be achieved in 3 full-body sessions of 3 to 4 sets per muscle per session. For an intermediate trainee, a 4-day upper or lower split delivering 12 to 16 sets per muscle weekly is well supported. Research on training program progression shows that frequency adjustments should follow volume adjustments. The first training variable to increase when progress stalls is volume. Add sets before adding sessions. When volume has reached the upper productive range of 15 to 20 sets per muscle per week and progress is stalled, then consider increasing frequency by splitting the volume across more sessions. This allows maintaining high stimulus per session while adding more stimulation opportunities. Based on the research, here is the frequency and volume guidance for most people. Train 3 to 4 days per week for resistance training. This is the optimal range for most individuals balancing stimulus and recovery. Aim for 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week as your volume target. Track this, not just your days in the gym. Rest at least 48 hours between sessions for the same muscle group. The research logic for training frequency is straightforward. If you train a muscle once per week with high volume, then you are missing multiple muscle protein synthesis windows within the 7-day period, leaving adaptation gains on the table. If you train every day without sufficient volume per session, then you are delivering insufficient stimulus while accumulating fatigue. If you train each muscle 2 to 3 times per week with 10 to 20 total sets, then you maximize both the science of training frequency gives a clear answer. Frequency matters, but volume is the primary driver of muscle growth and strength. Train each muscle group 2 to 3 times per week. Achieve 10 to 20 hard sets per muscle per week. Allow at least 48 hours of recovery between same muscle sessions. This framework, supported by meta-analyses and controlled trials, applies to virtually all experience levels, with beginners at the lower range and advanced trainees at the higher. Stop counting your training days and start counting your working sets per muscle group. The research has settled the frequency debate. It is volume that matters. Structure 3 to 4 sessions per week, track your sets per muscle group, ensure 48-hour recovery between muscle groups, and add volume progressively before adding sessions. This is what exercise science supports. This is what produces consistent, measurable progress.